she works on it, she's essentially a forensic scientist.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I've been trained in.
Right? And so instantly, in my mind, the imagination went to, all those movie shows that we see. CSI, crime scene investigation. And then I was like fascinated because Pauline actually took me into her office and then she took out all those fantastic kits that she has on how to detect things. Right? So, I looked at some of those, some chemicals, it's got a you guys should do that sometimes.
Yeah.
If you permit them, that is, right? And so she does a lot of that kind of work, and then we started talking about how all of that is very much intimately linked to the question of the built environment, right? How then we started thinking, okay, part of it, and a lot of it came from her. I was not even thinking like that. That, for example, let's say you have a fire, right? And you've got to figure out for insurance purposes that was this committed by an arsonist, right? Somebody who purposely has set fire to it, right? Guess who are the people who commit?
Forensic investigators.
Somebody like her. And then I was thinking, wow, man, why have architects really never thought about getting some training in something like this, right? And collaborating with people who work in these areas. Then got to know Pallavi has gotten interested in something very fascinating, forensic analysis of artwork, right? So there are artworks are constantly getting stolen,
Yeah.
right? Ownership claims are constantly in dispute, right? Questions of of its authenticity, copy, all of these questions. How do you detect all of that, right? Again, something very much related to questions of design, the built environment. So I started thinking that's fascinating. Yeah? I've never thought of it this way. It might be interesting for some of you to look at how this kind of work gets done. What is it? And many of you may find yourself, taking courses along when Pallavi offers something, right? And seeing that for your masters and later on a kind of a specialization that you want to get into, right? Because you can think of it, and as I said, I have zilch idea about this field, but as I think more clearly, there are roles of architects who would become evaluators, right? A building evaluation, right? So similarly, there can be architects, I'm thinking, who would work as forensic analysis of building. Not in this country, not in this country. But clearly there's a scope for that kind of work to be done, right? Because it's not as if that kind of stuff happens only in the West or somewhere, it's happening all the time. There just aren't people to do that kind of work, right? But I'm also thinking that having an idea of the kind of ways that forensic scientists analyze structures might give you an idea of how to design structures in a way, right? Which will be easily analyzable in a sense, right? So you can also think of it from that aspect, right? Whether you become a forensic analyst slash architect or not, or designer or not, or somebody who works on the built environment or not, right? But or you could just think that having this kind of knowledge might help you to understand the building from a completely different point of view, from maybe after it has been decomposed, destroyed, stolen, broken. How do we really analyze a building too, right? And that helps you to understand how you understand the question of materials in the making of the built environment, right? So I will stop there. Pallavi is the expert. She works on this. She will take this up and try to talk about it a lot more, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Pallavi.
Thanks.
Sorry, there was a very, just
No,
like
no,
off the cuff kind of things that I could think of in terms of, because this is something that I really haven't thought about, but it just, talking to you sparked.
No, it's a very interesting overlap. So like you mentioned, I was trained. My first training was in biotechnology. I have a postgraduate there. I went on there to King's College where I did my forensic science. For most part of my career, I was working with dead bodies. Not human, pig dead bodies, but I was working with maggots. I enjoyed that work thoroughly. Except that it started stinking up clothes. So, because dead bodies really stink, especially when they are eaten by worms. So I could never wear good dresses to work. So I was looking like, an opportunity to work in an area where, you'd have I could use my fancier wardrobe to work, uh, considering that is all my life, work home, work home. And then I came back to India intending to go back for a doctorate. Hasn't happened yet. But this job came along. As you know, this is a social science university primarily. There's law school, business school, liberal arts. So I was quite of a misfit here. When they say I'm associated with JIBS, it is because probably that's the only thing that has science in its name. And they thought, okay, this is forensic science, just put it in with all the other sciences. Because I didn't quite fit in as a faculty to any of the other schools. Although I do primarily teach law school, I end up now primarily teaching law schools. I offer a forensic elective, part of which is to help cater my training so that the lawyers can use it. So I simplify the science extremely. And in the course of that, I realized that part of their job is also to interact with art as an acquisition, as an investment. And buying art, when you're buying for your client, can be quite dicey because you don't know what you're getting into. Of course, you know who you're buying and what it is selling for, but there are a lot of other caveats that you need to take care of. First of all, it shouldn't be a forgery. It shouldn't be a stolen piece. So part of it is very scientific investigation. Part of it is it's just pure detective work. So it's a mixed match of both. It's a very interesting career for if you ever want to go into that. So my interest into arts came from there. And then I self-taught myself a lot because it's like a rabbit hole. Once you're in there, you go down. But I wasn't studying art as such. I do a bit of dabbling myself, but that is not what I was studying, how to create art. I was studying the more social aspects of the art, the more commercial aspects of art. So when I was asked to give you this lecture, because Jaideep and I have spoken a lot of times about different things. We have spoken about doing a forensic analysis on a building, which I hopefully will do consecutively.
We are going to do it next semester.
So I didn't quite know what to offer you. That would be interesting because your school name is Arts and Architecture, and I didn't know which part to concentrate on. Clearly, I don't lack much of the architectural knowledge. So what I did do is, did anyone go to an art exhibition in the Moot Court Hall on the other side of the building, which was put up by students? Did you happen to chance by it? No? Okay, so as part of my course, one of which is we are doing cultural policies and art market. Tapti's work was there, yeah.
Some of them went.
Yeah. I still have your work in my office though. It's all packed. But what the purpose of that exercise and the purpose of that elective itself is to make you guys aware. When you graduate from school, you might have different interests. Some of you may not go into designing big stuff. You might start designing small stuff. You might be associated with a furniture studio or with a gadget studio, and you might be designing stuff for them. Or you might be even freelancing on your own doing illustrations. I came in and I saw a lot of beautiful work. You might extend upon them. Some of you might just go into arts, be an artist, where you create work on 3-dimensional and 2-dimensional, but you pursue that as a career. Regardless of where you go, you are going to start off somewhere at the bottom of the entire career field. And there are lots of compromises that we end up making at the beginning of it because of, that's on. Come, but it's not coming. Where you end up doing that because you don't know what you're liable to. Okay.
Can I help you?
How long do I have for this conversation? 1 hour? Okay, so I assume these are works made by you, some of you. Okay, if now I approach you and let's say, who made this? Who made this? Is the artist in class? No? Okay, someone point out a work that was made by them. This one? This one? That one? Okay, you made it? Your name is? Kirti. Right. Now I tell you, I like that work, and I want to buy it. How much will you sell it to me for? Make a guess. This is business. This is how you start. It's very difficult for artists to get in the market by themselves. Now it's easier because you have certain web portals which allow you to create a profile, put up your own artwork, interested buyers will come by, you give the portal some percentage of whatever the pricing is. But earlier, and for a greater degree, it would have to be through networking. So this is networking. I know you, I know Reddy, if I come to his class, I like one of the work, I want to buy it. So Kirti, put a price on it. 5,000. What are you basing that price on? What?
It is an original work, an original idea.
Original work, original idea.
Yeah, and my time.
That's all? Okay, like anything else, let's go down the bare minimum. First thing you charge for is the basics of making the artwork, the manufacturing price. A4 paper, kind of thick sheets by the looks of it, whatever the pricing of that would be. The watercolors, individual tubes, all the brushes and paraphernalia used, all of that accumulated. That would, let's say, come up to 1,500. And then you add onto that your own skill and labor, however much you want to price that. Because I'm not a very good artist, I would price it at 500. She clearly is very confident in her work, so she's like, 2,000 for me. That's her profit. Other things, then, what do you consider? That is one way of selling, I see something on the board and I buy it as it is. You might want to frame it and all of that. So costing of that, the framing and everything. You might have to get insurance when you're not buying these kind of arts, but huge arts. There was an exhibition, Expresses, yeah? So the artist is from Delhi. Her work was transported here on campus. It was literally handled by Andrew himself, Andrew Rooney, Professor Andrew Rooney. So if something were to happen to the work while it was on property or while it was being installed or something, if it was damaged, who pays for the damages? What happens? Once your work is damaged, it's gone. So if something happened to that work, ideally, a sorry just wouldn't suffice. Because if she was going to sell it for 1.5 lakhs, that's an entire income gone. So, and it would be unfeasible. Well, technically, if she hadn't insured it, Andrew would have to pay her the market value or whatever price she had put on that art piece. But if she had insured it for transportation or if Andrew had insured it, considering he's the one organizing the exhibition, or if JSAA had insured it, insurance will do the payout. But there's a small premium that you do pay. So it's not as much as 1.5 lakhs, it might be 5 grams, 50K, I don't know. We have to work that out. All of those are costings. When you're selling it, let's say if Jaiveep is the gallery owner, like he brought me here so I could buy your art. So technically he mediated this, otherwise you and I would never get to know of each other. So a commission is due to him for facilitating you to sell your art. That can be anywhere between 3 to 10% more, depending on how much you sell for. That has to be negotiated with it. So there are a lot of costs that you want to.
Nowadays, galleries take 30 to 50%.
30% is what normally galleries take. Nowadays they take 50% because the art market is low. We had the 2008 recession. You're probably younger then. You didn't care. But jobs were few and not a lot of, so we are just coming out of the recession. That's good news for the art market in India because it looks like more people will be willing to invest their money into art. I'll tell you why this plays out. But what happens is galleries are not selling that much art, which means that the few that sell, they need to make enough commission out of those sales to keep the gallery afloat. Otherwise, it will shut down. It won't continue into the next financial year. So for that reason, artists are being asked to give 50% of their sale price to the gallery. However, not all galleries have a negotiated contract. It's not written down in paper anywhere that I will pay you, which means that if at any other time, now of course this is an understanding that has to come between the artist and the gallery that why I'm paying you 50%. Otherwise, an artist is fully within his rights to feel very exploited that half of his hard work, payment for his hard work, is going to someone who's basically just stored and displayed the item. So with the whole course is actually based around all of this nitty-gritties of how to get the right work to make preventive measures for dispute so that later on, should it ever go into dispute, but for that, one of the primary things that needs to be done is to inform the artist of what they're entitled to. Mostly, artists are too busy creating their work, they have this creative genius, they're churning out productions, they're not too worried about the business side of it. And that is how it should be, because that's a very hassled zone. If you start concentrating on that, it takes a lot of energy from your creative genius. However, when you're emerging, and that is why most of you have agents or galleries as representatives, dealers. But when you're just starting up the ladder, you might not be able to afford a dealer or a gallery. You might not yet be noticed by a gallery. You're pretty much putting your wares out there by yourself. The point is to make sure that you know what's in there for you, where you can stand by. The price that you put on your art is very flexible. It has to be informed somewhat by the art market, but it also is your own prerogative. Whatever you want. If she wants to sell it to me for 500, that works. If she wants to sell it to me for 5,000, that works too. It's her call. However, it has to be somewhat fed by what is the normal pricing of the art in the market, that kind of art on that kind of paper, watercolors, in the market. But about that, there are some things that, apart from that you are entitled to. And awareness of that, make sure that when people are negotiating with you, whether it's one-on-one buyer or an entire gallery or dealer negotiating with you, you are at a better place to know what you're entitled to. So I will apologize. I teach a law in the law school, so my terminology has become very legal jargon. So I entitled this, Minding Your Business is basically an art exhibition that I'm curating for early next year. It is on talking about art rights, artist rights. But what does that mean when I say artist rights? Do you know when you what are your rights as an artist? Just general understanding. Do you have any idea that what you are entitled to under the law? Copyright? Yeah, what is copyright?
It belongs to anyone who cooperates it, or like that would be a criminal offense or something.
Okay, yes. Is that all you know? If you make something, it's basically any creation, whether it's a work of art or whether it's a work it's considered your intellectual property because it came from your brain and your efforts. So you're entitled to certain economic rights. Economic rights is basically the legal way of saying that you get money out of it. And why there is a differentiation, because in the Indian Copyright Act and in a lot of copyright acts, you have two kinds of right: economic rights and non-economic rights. I'll talk about the non-economic rights, which are called moral rights, at the end of it. But economic rights are essentially your copyright, anything else that you think you're entitled to, any other rights. Okay, question. You're wearing a t-shirt that says what? Unreality. If you don't mind me, I'm going to be a bit... where did you buy that from?
I bought from H&M.
H&M. So clearly there were a lot of pieces by that in different sizes.
Yeah.
Would you say that, I mean, there's no way you can know that, but would you say that's only a product that's sold on H&M brand?
Yes.
Probably. But now if I like his t-shirt very much and I go and I have a black t-shirt and I just go to one of those t-shirt printers and I say, you write out unreality in that font on my t-shirt, and is that allowed?
I mean, you can do that, but then would you be satisfied with the work you will get? That's the question.
That is the question of originality.
The order of the original artwork.
Do you think the market cares? Basically, I just like the look of it. I don't care if it's a bit shoddy and it will like chip off, the latex printing thing will start chipping off in a bit. It will be grounds for copyright infringement. But technically H&M is selling thousands of pieces. How will they know that mine is not the one? What?
Becomes a problem if you produce them in bulk or something and then make profit out of it.
It used to become a problem for any bulk produced art. It wouldn't qualify under copyright. Copyright is for intellectual property that is not being commercialized, to give you more access to the economic benefits of that, such as artwork installations, which are usually one in a piece or a limited edition kind. It was not usually stored for commercial goods. However, since 2000, we have a thing called the Design Act, which I'm not sure a lot of artists, and this is where you need to come in, because you're in that fine area between art and architecture, and some of that will include designing around a lot of things. Design Act 2000, which you can read, because it's an act, it's going to be very boring, but I'll give you the brief. Oh wait, I missed all the. Okay, Design Act prevents you from copying designs. That's a place where you can actually protect that design. That word, unreality, written in that font with that kind of shadowing, can be protected by H&M if they register it. However, the protection is not the same as copyright. Copyright is, like I mentioned, 60 years through the lifetime of the artist and beyond. So you get a copyright to that artwork for until you die, and then 60 years beyond that. However, once you register something for a design, that will only be registered from the date of registration up till 10 years. If you pay $2,000 more, you can extend it to 15. But that's it. After 15 years, you don't even have to pay debt. After 15 years, I can copy that design on a t-shirt I own and print it. What if I changed the color? This is a black and yellow. What if I made a dark blue and fluorescent orange? The t-shirt is dark blue, the unreality font is fluorescent orange. Would that be a copyright infringement or a design copyright infringement?
Could be a design. Copying the design, just changing color.
Yeah, okay, fine. Great that you know that. Because lawyers would be very confused because it's very fine print. That's where the fine print's, yeah. When you do copy, you have to alter it in a way that changes it perceptively. if I were to underline unreality, put some flowers, like I take what is on her t-shirt, the flowery motif, I put that somewhere around his unreality thing, and that's a new design. Now if I make that on my t-shirt,
Can I indicate the jurisprudence of that is not defined yet?
which is,
The law for India is so new that derivative works.
oh no, that is defined in the basic criteria that defines the originality.
This act was pushed through as part of the WTO regime.
Yeah.
India has no historical jurisprudence.
No, there is no historical jurisprudence. But the law is very specifically stating that it has to go beyond fair appropriation. Now, there have been a few cases.
Fair appropriation is the thing that everything turns on. What is fair use?
Fair use and appropriation. Do I define fair use and appropriation for you? Do you know what these words mean just by themselves?
Would be helpful if you did.
Yeah? Okay, so this is an illustration made by an Indian illustrator. She's quite young. This is an illustration sold online on Instagram by a Singapore lady. A lady settled in Singapore. She's selling it on cushions. This is the Insta picture. Now, is this a copyright infringement or not? Look carefully. This is basically an exercise in find the differences. Why is this not an copyright infringement?
It's not a blind rip-off. It's not a blind rip-off of what she did. There are changes to it, but very subtle changes.
It's like an alter.
So would say it would be a design thing, not the.
Yeah, if you see that the birds are a bit different in that they are not as this bird has a flower and a sparkle in the eye, that bird doesn't, except that the color palette itself has been changed. A lot of the adornment has been taken off. Sorry?
One bird is also not
Yeah, there's a bird missing. She's got the red in her hand and the red on the cheek, which is not there. This is basically a very muted version of this. Now, this is a real life case of copyright infringement that happened. The illustrator, she's Meera Malhotra. She calls this print Bani Thani.
It is it's made by Nihal John. It's made by Nihal John. It's the original painting in the Indian Art Fashion Museum.
Yeah, the original painting, yes, she illustrated it. That's fair use appropriation. Because I took something in a different media and I changed the media. When I change the media, that becomes a different thing. Unfortunately, this could have been a brilliant case of jurisprudence setting, but she didn't go to court and that's a common problem. You don't have the kind of money to afford legal fees to take this to court. Legal proceedings in India will go on for long, so a lot of financial loss can still happen. However, there are legislations from abroad where this has been evoked a number of times to understand the nuanced version of when is it fair use and when is it plagiarism. Now, see, it all depends on what each judge decides, how much the difference is, and whether there is a considerably transformative is the key word, transformative difference. You all know Kuntz. He's one of the famous contemporary living artists. Well, he was technically not trained as an artist. This is a very old picture taken by Rogers. I forget his full name. I'm very bad with names, so I will have to concede that as of now. This is a sculpture Kuntz made, derived from this picture. When this was made, and because Rogers was a photographer himself, and this was a photograph clicked by him, copyrighted by him, he filed a copyright infringement. The court at that point, in 1922, and I say this because it's a journey. The understanding is also a journey for the US court themselves about where it is fair use and appropriation. At that point, they claimed that this was an infringement. The medium was different, but the judge refused to consider it, saying that the work itself is not transformed. You have taken the image just as it is from the picture and recreated it in 3 dimensions, but you have not changed the meaning or the focus subject of the artwork. Thereby, you are infringing on his IP property. That was the decision in 1992. Consecutively, there were a lot more other decisions. This is a print from a magazine. And this is an artwork created by Coombs. Now, this picture is by Blanche. He used to click pictures for fashion magazines, and this is quite some time back, so this was in vogue. He took this picture and collaged it on a different landscape. If you can't tell, this is that feed, right? So, Blanche again sued him for infringement. And when that happened, this time, because it has moved some time, the understanding of the court has evolved. In 2000, the court ruled that this is not infringement, because the image, even though the subject, the focus of the image has been copied, it has been transformed in context to the other things that is in the new artwork, so that the meaning does not remain the same. Art evolves, it lends a new meaning, and because of that, the use of this image in that.
Again, not just that, in Coasley Branch, judgment actually said that it can be treated as a commentary on Blanche's original work. This person is transformative, is commenting on that, hence the image could be used unaltered.
Yeah, that could have also been said for when Koons could have made a commentary on Roger's work, which is why I don't bring in that argument. There's also another famous case of someone clicking a picture of this lady photographer clicked a picture of the portraits done by a previous photographer as a tribute to him. And they're very fascinating, interesting questions. What I'm trying to tell you is that the understanding of the court itself is changing. And as their interpretation changed, because they are considered to be the authority on the law, the understanding of the art world, or at least what is allowed, is changing as well. However, one of the persons who's constantly pushing that is Richard Prince. He is the most sued artist, been sued for long, mostly because his work is mostly appropriated. He specializes in the take on other artists' works or other kinds of artwork. And sometimes he pushes on the boundary of fair use and plagiarism. That's very dicey. He's lost some cases, won some cases. However, you see these work. Now, this is from a series by Carew, black and white series, where he went in the Peruvian mountains and took a number of photographs of the tribes that lived there. These were all published in a long time back, after which Prince took these and collaged them with contemporary, with random just photoshopping, you can call it, but also otherwise. Now, this is just one of the photographs. You have to see the extent to which the entire series has been, you can Google them, has been photoshopped, you can say. Now, when this went into court, the court decided that the transformative nature of such changes, by supposing the perception of a reasonable viewer, has to conform. Now, of course, when you look at this, you can tell that those 3 blue dots have been added and a guitar has been added. By that, not much has changed. I can still see Carew's original piece. But the understanding of the court said that they brought in the role of the reasonable viewer. Now, perspectives can matter, can differ. You can see a dot placed on a canvas and assume that this transforms the entire artwork or what the art is trying to convey. Whereas someone else will be like, no, that's just a dot. It doesn't really alter it that much, and therefore this is a copyright infringement. The court here said that you have to look at it from what they consider the normal audience. A fairly artistically educated, so you give some credibility, he's just not some layman, a fairly artistically educated audience, if the image appears transformed to them, it is considered as transformative enough to evade the Copyright Infringement Act. However, and this I bring up for very different reasons, is because this is one of his latest pieces of prints where he has literally blown up Instagram photos of random people he found on, and the exhibition is just entirely this. So this is one of the view where he's just blown up different portraits self-taken and published by different authors. Is he infringing on these authors' copyrights? What's your call?
Yeah, if he's given the exact same thing that they posted for their feed, and is he selling those works?
It's an exhibition. He's definitely getting some economic benefit from having put up that exhibition.
Yes, because there was no illegal agreement between
Yeah, these are not
the
permissible prints. Yeah, so all these, not all of them, but most of them are looking to litigate. I'm not sure what the current thing in is, but anyway, this is being discussed academically because it is an infringement. There was no permission given.
This was settled out of court.
Settled out of court.
The Second Circuit remanded it back to the Southern District of New York. But before
Yeah, I didn't follow up on the case, so
they
settled out of court. But legally, yes, that is a copyright infringement if you have not asked to use. It doesn't matter if you blow it out, put up on a different medium, unless he has transformed it considerably. It would be. Now, closer home, I came across this earlier this year, HT City. Anupama Dayal, she is a independent fashion designer. She accused W for Women. You're aware of that brand? They do ethnic wear for Indian women. It's an Indian-built brand. She accused them for plagiarizing some of her designs. Two designs. She called them the Khara print and the AO print or AO print. I'm not sure. Well, she published a huge newsletter, and W responded saying that it is not copyright infringement. But I bring it up for your... So these are the prints in question. Okay, this central motive, and that's how design is defined. The central motive is what is in question. She argues this and this is the same. Now you have to consider inspired work as well. Would you consider that that's... This is quite dicey because both of them claim they take inspiration from different tribal designs. Now, one thing you can't do is copyright a traditional design or something that is not original. Traditional designs that have stayed for long, whether you consider Madhubani or whether you consider Ellora art, or any of those traditional motifs from India and any that is outside, you cannot copyright these. So these are free use, available for all. Western artists can use them, you can use them. But any inspired work from these motifs, if combined suitably with different patterns, that whole design per se can be patented. But it is obviously very, inspiration looks different. Here we can both see there is some similarity, but it's not exactly the same. So when in the next, I'll give you some blown up images of this is what she's claiming is the copyrighted thing, and this is W's legal proof that they did not. Apart from the fact that W has been using it from 2011, which was prior to Anupama Dayal using it in her print, W is able to provide research that supports how they arrived at that certain design. Now, this is how they patent the design. They take this work, which is here, say from this traditional print from some country, Uzbekistan, they take the outside, not the top, but the outside rail for this work. And that's how you combine motifs to create a design that you can now at least copyright. If I were to just take this work, I could not copyright it because it's a traditional motif, it cannot be copyrighted. If I combine it with something else, that can then go on to be copyrighted. So they showed a lot of things. They show a previous provenance of it, and thereby it cannot be copyrighted. Now, one of the basic criteria for the Design Act is that it should not be published before by anyone, by you or by anyone, before you register the design for the patent, for the Designs Act protection. So, considering that this was also published in a book called Silk and Cotton by Susan Miller, it's void. Clearly, the inspiration is gathered from a lot of traditional artwork and from different authors. So, Anupama Dayal cannot claim to have absolute copyright of that piece. But these could be very nuanced aspects of design. Next on, I live in Tulip, and I have a spare room, which I use as my studio cum cat's room. But I have a very big wall there because there's no furniture, not many furniture, and I was planning on doing a huge print of this Frida Kahlo. I did not end up doing it, and I'm glad I did not, because that would be an infringement of something called trademark. How many of you have come across on the website or anywhere else Frida Kahlo's face being used in a print form? On t-shirts, on posters, any derivative, put some glasses on her, comes across as cool Frida Kahlo. How many of you have never come across Frida Kahlo's face on stuff?
You guys are not following the right Instagram handles. For one.
Now, apparently what new information that I gathered is that her face and her appearance and every aspect of her life is basically copyrighted. It's called trademarked because when you're trying to use it for commercial purposes, it becomes a trademark. It's trademarked by the Frida Kahlo Corporation, which is a trustee board, has many people, also has her surviving family members. And that came up because Barbie made a Frida Kahlo Barbie, for which they did take the rights from FKC, Frida Kahlo Corporation, to make a Barbie that looked like Frida Kahlo. However, now what happens is her niece, Mara Cristina Romeo Pinedo, is part of the board, of the FKC board, although presently they dispute that she is a silent member. This is a very, very, very small overview. What happens is she went online to news medias and everyone, and she gave interviews objecting to this production. Why? Because one, it looks nothing like Frida Kahlo looked like. It is the traditional petite Barbie form. Frida Kahlo suffered from a very bad accident and she was not this slim. She was quite a plump Mexican woman. Secondly, as you can tell from the Barbie, it's more fair skin than Mexican skin is. In the current wake of affairs, these are very sensitive issues to bring up. So, and this is now a traditional Mexican dress, but few of the other, the initial releases were not even in legitimate Mexican attire. So all of these were objections that the niece went on to put, and FKC sued the niece for defamation because FKC has given permission. What the niece did was she approached the court for an injunction on the sales of that Barbie in Mexico only, and it was granted. So basically, there are none of these Barbies selling in Mexico, and that's probably their target market. So Barbie calls up FKCs, shouts at them, probably, I'm dramatizing all of this, and FKC in turn sues the niece with like, well, what the bleep, you're from our company, you're destroying our market. We approved Barbie to use this thing, and now you're causing problems, which is stopping the sale of it. Now that's a different legal issue that is now being fought between the corporation itself and the two descendants of Frida Kahlo, who claim that they are no longer being taken into consideration of the FKC. However, side news, those two members also have started a second brand that also takes distributes stuff inspired by Frida Kahlo and has the tagline Frida Kahlo item, whatever they're selling. So that's again competition. So a lot of things can be playing out. This Barbie is available elsewhere in the US, but not in Mexico, because this case is still pending because there are two counter suits now presented. FKC suing them for copyright infringement as well, because they have a competitor company that is also harboring the Frida Kahlo tagline. But that means that I cannot produce, and would I be in violation of copyright of the FKC if I were to make a Frida Kahlo mural on my wall?
Yes.
Would I be? No. That's quite interesting. Because I'm not selling it. There is no economic benefit. If I make a mural, if Alok Parnas commissions me to make a mural in her house and she pays me some money for it, I get some money for doing something that is, and then I can't use Frida's face, because that is copyrighted now. So, in your journey as a artist, initially you might imitate a lot of the masters. That is the nature of how artists evolve, how they practice. You practice the best, the techniques of the best in order to emulate them, and that's how you evolve as an artist. Some of your practice pieces will be awesome, and people will want to acquire it from you, because not everyone can afford a Van Gogh, but if you've made an impressionist work that looks very good, people would want to buy it. Give it away, because if you sell it, you are infringing copyright. Not for Van Gogh, because he's been dead a long time, and then probably 60 years have passed. I would have to check the date on when he died. More than 60 years, yeah. So he's beyond, he's like free market, we can use his work. But not Picasso. There is Picasso that was in NHS. So this is the basics of the Design Act that I had mentioned. I should have put this slide earlier. When you actually go into practice, it would be good.
One thing, if you copy Frida Kahlo's face or after a date of 60 years of her death, then it's okay.
No, Frida. So Frida Kahlo's face, I think, is because it's been trademarked by a corporation. You will never have use of it. But her works, like if you copy a Frida Kahlo masterpiece, that is okay. After 60 years of her death. To use that, to use it in the same way, not a derivative or appropriated way, but to use it in the same way would be alright. Like Tagore. A lot of Tagore's work, he's one of the Indian people who just passed the copyright infringement thing. So now all his works are up for grabs, you know. You can sell them, you can use them in any form of artistic way without giving him any monetary remunerations. Now what does this copyright do actually? What happens, why do I protect you after you're dead? So if I were to copy your artwork and I was caught, what would I have to do legally?
Pay the family.
Pay you some money if you're living. If you are dead, post-death, it depends on who's benefiting from you. Ideally, your family who were dependent on your artwork, or else you have a trustee, a law trust or firm, or you have a board, like Pollock has a board. So they manage their estate. So whoever manages the artist estates, it gets all that money. So the payment is to them. So it's basically financial security from your work that is still available to your children and descendants even after your death. It is not infinitely accessible. However, first, this is an artwork installation at, I think, the Chicago Museum, but it went everywhere. This is a picture of a man from the audience. He's not the artist. He's picking a candy. The installation is candy in different cellophane papers, wrapped in different cellophane papers, piled up in the corner. That's the installation. Is he allowed to eat that candy? And would he be violating some law if he were to eat that candy?
The whole motive of them being in a gallery, yes.
What if the artist meant it to be eaten?
Then he should have mentioned it.
Yeah, like there
Go ahead.
have been some kind of, yeah, claims like we can have this, but the fact that it's in a gallery, that says it's.
What if the art was to see the urges of the audiences? Some people can have better restraint than the others because it is chocolate after all. Some people are better at resisting chocolate. And what if the unsaidness of it meant that it could be encouraged?
That still means you can eat it because that is a possibility it is considered.
Okay, when I buy that work of Kirti, can I eat that? I'm not into eating paper, but if I were.
I mean, it's your property.
No, this is what you should know. No, why? Because there is something called moral right that you can exert on your work even after you sell off the ownership. Copyright is a right that you have even after you sold it off. When Kirti sells me the work, she still remains the creator and she owns the copyright of it even though I own the physical property of it. Similarly, she has something that is called moral right, which is not technically an economic right. It has no monetary benefits, but it can be made monetary beneficial. Why? Because under the moral right, she has 3 rights. 1, whenever that work is used anywhere or displayed in public, she needs to be attributed as the creator. If I put it in my house and somebody asks me, oh, this is really pretty, who made it? I can't say me. I have to acknowledge her. I cannot say you. That would be misattribution. I have to acknowledge her. I wrap up. Oh, all right, yeah. Just 5 minutes more. But if I eat it, it would be violating the second right, which is the right to integrity. I have destroyed your work. Your work survives beyond the sale to prove to be part of you. Not only because it's a part of your expression, your emotions, your efforts, but also because it legitimately adds to your market. When somebody sees your work in my house, they will like it. They might go back to your studio and buy more of it. If I demolish that work, I encroach on your market. I cut down the market that you could possibly have enjoyed. By that logic, you can sue me. So if I eat your work, sue me. And then I have to pay you some money for it. So in that way, it becomes a monetary benefit. But that is quite interesting because this can be used in different ways. Recently, there was a building in Deloitte, in the US, which had a lot of street art going on to it. It was called 5 Points. It was going to be demolished, and the owner of the building, whitewashed it. And he had to pay $6.5 million to the 21 artists who had painted on it because he destroyed artworks. It's called the 5 Point case. It's considered an epic win for street art. Because I have to wrap up, I'd leave it to you if you want to read it up. But street art is an amazing area for discussion on the other. There are lots of back and forth on that. But this is a real life case. It's called the Tête de Fond. You know of the game called Cards of Humanity?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a fun game. So what the makers do is they ask people to register on a portal just before Christmas, and depending on how many people have registered, they will then, if you give some money, they will send you a gift worth that money. So 1 year it was like 1 square inch of a random island in Pacific. 1 year they were given that you have the people who registered were given a choice. This is a piece by Picasso, made in 1962. Picasso died in 1973. This could be divided up into very minuscule pieces of 15 millimeters each, 1.5 millimeters each, and given to each of them. So then everyone will have 1.5 millimeter of a real Picasso, or it could be donated to the Museum of Art in Chicago. So they were asked to vote on it. Most people voted that it should be outrageous, so you should donate it to the Art Institute. However, if they had voted that it should be given to the people who paid some money to register on it, would the creators of the card game be in violation of an artist's moral rights? How long do you think moral rights last?
As long as the research
I mean, the moral rights just depend upon the artist or the owner as well.
Okay, so copyrights can be transferred. When I buy her work, if she gives it to me in writing that is co-signed by us, that she transfers the copyright to me, then she no longer gets to claim any of the benefits under copyright. I can now reproduce this, resell this, create more pictures of this, posters, enlarge, whatever, and sell it, and I get all the money. She doesn't. Moral rights cannot be transferred. You have a question?
Okay, the thing that happened with the girl with balloon recently, as soon as the painting was sold, half of it was shredded.
Yeah.
So were the moral rights of the owner were violated with that because the painting was technically sold?
The moral right is never with the owner, it's with the artist. And since the artist Banksy was involved in the shredding piece, it was his theater, so his moral rights is not violated. If the owner had done that by mistake, shredded a piece after he had bought, he would be in violation of Banksy's moral rights.
So the person who buys it has technically no rights of it?
No rights. You cannot get my moral rights. Tomorrow if you sell me your work and I pass it on, I then resell it, because in auctions I sell it to Tapti, and then Tapti puts it up in a certain way which I don't like, I cannot object to it. The objection has to come from her.
Okay, if I'm purchasing something for XYZ amount, whatever, then what rights do I have over it? Just the fact that I own it? Or, I mean, if I can't even, have that kind of a right, that someone destroys it, I can't, say...
You will get something if you insure it. If you buy something, then you pay a premium on insurance, which means if somebody destroys it, you can get an insurance money, and the artist will get their moral right. If they know who has destroyed it, they can sue the person. Technically, it's called reproduction rights, resale royalty. Royalty rights, as with music or films, artist is also entitled to it. In the Indian Act though, while the right is given, they don't give a percentage table. So this is why the contract is more necessary, because you can ask anywhere between 10% to 50%, and the person may or may not pay, and then you'll have to go to court. But the best way is to put it in the thing. It's nominal under the Berne Convention. We have it under 4% for the highest amounting price, as low as 0.25%. But whatever, it's some money to the artist back for what is technically her work.
I'm still thinking of the fact that, if I purchase something and, okay, in that case the artist himself destroyed it, so as a owner of the painting, I would definitely feel violated. Okay, the thing I purchased for $1 million is being shredded right in front of me. That's not the artwork that I paid for. If you think about it that way, this is not the artwork that I technically paid for, and this is not what I want.
So if I was, that's a violation of the contract. So in auctions, what happens? The contract is not sealed when the paper is signed. The contract is sealed when the hammer comes down. The hammer came down. The contract is sealed between Sotheby's and me, if I'm the buyer, okay? And then Banksy started shredding it.
Yeah.
So technically, it was destroyed. Now, this is a case study that we have done. The postulation of it is that if I was fully within my rights as a buyer to sue Sotheby's, because before putting the artwork to show, for sale, Sotheby's does what is called due diligence, which means it does a condition report, it does a testing of thing. Amongst all those very skilled examination, I cannot believe that they missed a shredder fitted in the frame. That means they did not check it properly. So the lack of due diligence done on their part means that I could sue them. However, if they can prove that they had done every possible check they could have, that they normally do for everything, they did their due diligence, but yet this happened. There is a provision called rescission of contract, mutual mistake. These are all very legal terms, by which you go back to the status quo as was before, as if the work never was put up on sale. So I don't owe you any money, the contract is never made, I don't owe you any money, you don't owe me an artwork. We go back to the conditions as were before. So that means the contract will be annulled, it will be rescinded. That could have been one go if they were not at fault. But what Sotheby's did, and that is amazing, because this is, Sotheby's is pretty big in the art market, okay? What they say and what they do and what it goes, it kind of creates the... They started creating this whole enigma around the art piece as being, oh, it's a new art, it's now worth double the price, and it's like, this is the first art made at auction. And suddenly the word caught on in the market that this piece is now double its price. So me, an unwilling buyer who's like, I don't want this, now it's like all shredded, it's torn, I don't want this. But they hyped it up and they made it worth double the price. And they offered it to me for the same price. Which means in the present market, they made it profitable for me to resell it. If I were to sell it now or within the next 2 years or 3 years, I'm pretty sure the vibe will stay, so I can sell it for 3 million, 4 million in the recent future. So that's how they kind of made sure that they made the sale, which is a fantastic play by Sotheby's.
That's a different kind of a thing that we talked about later. But then, is that fact that, I purchase something and something like that happens, I don't have any rights.
Does that come under consumer?
You can sue. Consumer rights is only restricted to commercial goods, does not work for artworks. You can sue for breach of contract, Sotheby's, or you can rescind it, which means there's no loss. You didn't pay anything, you never got the artwork, you have to go back to it, because it's mutually not the person's fault. If it was vandalized, it was not Banksy but a third person who slashed through the screen, you could sue them, but then it depends on their financial status whether they'll be able to pay you that money or not. Otherwise, they'll just serve a term in jail and that'll be it. But as such, yeah, the owner does not get much in ways of economic rights. It's mostly, you get it when you sell it off, but otherwise you don't get, that's why you insure.
So now tell me, when it got shredded, the price got hyped. Would Banksy get
Ooh, yeah, Banksy doesn't. One, because nobody knows who Banksy is. You cannot pay the artist his economic rights, any resale royalty or reproduction rights, if you don't know who to pay.
But I'm sure Sotheby's knows who Banksy is because the transaction happening there.
No.
And Banksy.
So Banksy makes he makes a lot of illegal artwork, which is called vandalism. Graffiti on walls that you don't own. That's technically illegal. But those are some of Banksy's artwork. He also has some original prints. So all the artworks that he makes on them, he makes prints of it, which are on sale. The one that was at Sotheby's was an original Banksy because it was a print Banksy. It was paper, I mean you saw it, said. That he sells via a portal that is also anonymous called Pest Control. But they officiate, they authenticate the art piece and they sell it, and that's kind of how he...
So would Pest Control get that extra hype?
Technically, pest control would get on the first sale. When they sold to you, they would get it. But when you sell to somebody's, you will not have to pay pest control anything. Resale price. It's just like selling used furniture. When I buy from you, I pay something, and then I sell to someone else. I don't pay you something of the profit that I make from there. That is the nature of how. That is why artwork increases in prices. The art market by itself is a very different play altogether between the primary market and the secondary market. But you might get unless you have put a resale doctrine in the contract, and that is why contracts are so important, where you say that every time you sell it to a new owner, I should get some percentage of the net profit, then you are entitled to it. Otherwise, the first owner keeps everything, then the second owner, then the third owner keeps the net profit. The auction house gets a part of the commission for facilitating the sale. Any other questions?
So who are these lawyers who deal with artists? I mean, like we have corporate law, we have civil law. So we have.
So technically, art lawyers are not a thing. Art law isn't a thing in India yet. It's basically different aspects. So moral rights, copyright is IP law. Then you have property law, which will determine ownership and everything. You have contract law, which helps you create contracts and everything. So basically, an art lawyer would be somebody who basically is a law student but practicing in art. That's technically how you get employed in this field. Mostly just normal LLB lawyers who are then specializing to the art law and are well informed in IP rights and everything. But it is not necessarily only restricted to lawyers, because this field is so, I mean, you can't legislate when you are, if you're not a lawyer, but litigate, but litigation is not the first part of it. Mostly it is always, very few cases get to court, because the kind of money involved in art transactions is quite high, so people are also moneyed. You don't want to take this to court. That is why the jurisprudence, the examples of legal court decisions on what they believe, how the law looks at art, is also very limited. More so in India. More so in India because artists are not aware of the rights, they don't sue. The basic thing they are aware of is copyright, and even when that is infringed, they don't want to go to court because who will bear the hassle? Like, doing litigation in India is a long-term commitment. And as an emerging artist, you don't have the time. You're trying to make money off your artwork. You don't have the time to spend it on legal fees. Which is where I come in, is that the way I am teaching my class to the law school students especially, is to make it preventive. Do not get to the point where it is going to get into a dispute and therefore will need to be litigated. Get a contract in place. Let the buyer know that if he does violate any of these rights, he can be prosecuted. Therefore, he should not violate them. If he violates them, that contract also states what you should do. So this can be an out-of-court decision. Just get the two people, it's called arbitration. You get the two people on the table, you say, well, you did this thing, there's the proof, so now you pay up, and they pay up. So that happens as well. And that's a more easy way. That's faster, it's less expensive, and you don't have, and because it is not publicized, you get to preserve all reputations involved. So that works for the benefit, because when a small-time designer is accusing a big-time designer of plagiarizing, what is at stake is their entire brand reputation. They might defy it, or defy the accusation just because they want to preserve their market. However, if you would take them on the side, sit at a table, say, look, I know this is what you did, I'm fine, now you're using it, you're creating a market, that's fine, just pay me some money for it. Either buy it or pay me royalties on every sale you make. And if that is done on the site, contractually, it allows you to benefit from your work, economically at least, and it preserves their market. Later, the bigger you get, you have the right to assert your right to attribution, which means that you should be acknowledged as the creator of that design. That is also something that you can negotiate. So it depends on where you are in the art market. Emerging, average, medium, or like pretty much established up there. Your fight with these kind of issues will matter there. But I hope with this class you have some idea of how to preserve at least your economic benefit, which is the first thing you want to do with your career, make some money out of it. And then your other rights can come into play as you get more aware and practiced in asserting it. Right? Would you like this PPT? Should I transfer it? Yeah? This is somebody's laptop, right? Yours. Can I just transfer it on your desktop? You can do that. I mean, it's pretty much cut off. So I look forward for her to sharing that with you. If you have any questions, this was only restricted to 1 hour. I don't know if I got through everything. These are part of 3 lectures in my course. So they each have a class dedicated to them. Didn't have the time to discuss. This is very brief, very overview. It's more nuanced that you have. The case studies were also very, I just blitzed through them. But it's interesting to read how the law looks at them, because that will inform you how the market will look at it and whether or not your case will hold or not. But I believe in the present market, it's better to be preventive than defensive.
Thank you, Paulami.